Want to hear wisdom from company builders and founders? We have what you need right here on The Leadership Voice. Welcome to The Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show will dive deep into wisdom of company builders and founders. Joining us today are Terry Giles, founder of Giles Enterprises, and Dean Stoecker, executive chairman and co-founder of Alteryx. But let's start things off with today's quote of the day. Today's quote comes from Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about it, you'll do things differently. Our first guest today on The Leadership Voice is Terry Giles. Terry Giles is one of my favorite people that I've gotten to know since starting the Center for Leadership. Terry rose up from humble beginnings and dozens of childhood upheavals to eventually attend Cal State Fullerton, earn his degree, his law degree, and went on to excel as a criminal attorney and entrepreneur. His businesses have crossed over into the automobile industry, banking, medical diagnostics, technology distribution, big box retail, and luxury hotels. Terry is one of the most purposeful and pragmatic executives I know. When others say, "Can it be done?" he's the person that says, "We will find a way." Please welcome good friend, great person, Terry Giles.
Hi, Jay. It's great to be here. Thanks for that nice introduction.
Absolutely, Terry. Let's just jump right in because we're really excited to have you here to talk about building companies and
Fantastic.
Pearls of wisdom that we can share with young entrepreneurs.
I look forward to it.
So our first question is about success. What is success to you, and how has that changed during your career?
Well, it's changed quite a bit. As you know, I grew up pretty poor as a kid, and so making money was important to me. And it provided freedom, and it provided an opportunity to do some of the things that I thought I could do. So I would say success to me originally used money as the yardstick of how I was doing. But that's changed quite a bit over the years. I would say the thing I'm probably most proud of, and I consider to be one of my areas of success, is how long the people that are meaningful to me in my business life and in my personal life have been with me. Pretty much everybody that I can think of in my organizations have been with me 30 years or more. And that tells me that I was right in trusting them and believing that they would be great people. And it also tells me that I must be doing something right too, because they want to stick with me, they want to continue to be in partnership with me, and I like that.
So you've created some really long-term work, business relationships with folks. Has that always been the case, or is that something that has evolved?
Well, when you're starting out, everybody's a beginner, and you can't really judge that until you've been in business for 40 or 50 years. Then you get to look back on it and see if you've been successful from that standpoint.
Oh, terrific. So our next thing I want to talk about are choices, because as an entrepreneur, you have to make a lot of different kinds of choices. So how do you decide where to invest, and how has your investment strategy evolved during your career?
Well, I've approached it from a lot of ways. I've taken ideas and turned them into companies. I've taken companies that existed and hopefully made them better. I've taken companies that existed and transformed them into something else. So I would say, though, that the primary thing I have to be careful about is to make sure that I can envision myself as a customer of that company. Every time I bought something where I actually couldn't see myself as a customer, I've run into problems. But where I can see myself as a customer or a client, then I can build the business towards satisfying that customer base.
So having empathy for the customers that you would be serving has been one of the keys for your investment strategy.
No question. If I can see myself as a customer or a client of that business, then I can ask myself, how do I want to be treated? What kind of a deal am I looking for? What would I expect out of that business to cause me to be a return client?
Well, that's terrific. So let's talk a little bit about pivots and changes, because we all talk about adaptability and agility and the need to be able to roll with the punches and things. How do you decide, as an investor, as a businessman, when to hold them, when to build them, and when to sell them?
Well, you know, it's a funny thing. I've had over 35 different kinds of companies now, all over. And probably the truth is I've got adult ADD, and I just get bored easy. And so I've also discovered that while I really do have a skill set in imagining what the business is going to be and in driving it to a certain point, but I do not have the skill sets to actually perform the function in that business day to day. You have to have people who come in to make a business successful over the long haul. They've got to kind of grind it out day to day. Once you get it where you want it to be, they've got to keep repeating what it is that's working. And I'm not very good at that. Again, I think it's because I get bored. So the reason I've been involved in so many enterprises is oftentimes what I do is I get involved, we build it, I'm excited about it, and now we got to do it like that every day, and that's when I'll sell it. And I'll be off on some other adventure. And there've been some companies I wish I'd kept. I wish I'd kept the bank, for instance. And then there have been enterprises that I have stayed with. You know, the hotel operations I've been in for now over 30 years, so I've stuck with that. Just because it's so fluid. I mean, it changes every day. When you have 5-star hotels in Europe, you know, when we have a 9/11 or we have a 2008 financial crisis, man, you're almost starting from scratch and rebuilding your client base and reinventing the business. So in the hotel business, I find that we reinvent ourselves on a regular basis. A Michelin star restaurant, how we deliver the food, how we deliver the wine changes with different cultures and changes with different moods. And the way you decorate the hotels changes because some things go out of style, other things come into style. We're doing, even though one of our hotels is 1,000 years old, the way you do hotels today is a little bit more of a modern look compared to what it was 30 years ago. So I think one of the reasons I've stayed in that business is because it's so challenging and things change so often.
So for you, as an investor, as a businessman, the challenge of building, of creating, of changing, of transforming, of growing, moving the needle, in many ways is a lot of your excitement.
There's no question about it. Yeah, that's what turns me on.
Well, terrific. So now we have a chance for you to give advice to a young entrepreneur. What advice can you give somebody that's either taking over a business or starting a business, they want to succeed? What can you give them to help them to become successful as an entrepreneur?
One of the things that's most important in our organizations is integrity. Now, we don't define integrity the way a lot of people would. I think most people think of integrity and they think about telling the truth, and I'm not trying to say it isn't that. But for us, integrity is doing what you say you're going to do in the time frame you've been given to do it. Now, sometimes you have a situation arise where you just can't perform. Maybe it turned out that the idea was such that never could be performed, or maybe some other event has occurred that keeps you from performing it. That's okay, but you have to then tell the other people in the organization that you're not going to be able to perform it. You clean up what other mess that makes, and then you enter into a new commitment. But you always have to be in integrity, which is basically doing what you say you're going to do, or coming back and explaining why it is you can't do it. Where organizations get into trouble is when people aren't performing the tasks they were supposed to perform, and they don't tell anybody about that. Now, all of a sudden, if you have a lot of people in an organization doing that, an organization can transform itself into something that you've never wanted it to be.
And so maintaining that, I would call it the alignment between our words and actions, but also making sure that that we're communicating our actions before or after or during.
That's right.
Well enough.
The other thing I'd say to somebody just starting out as an entrepreneur, if working 40 hours a week is important to you, if taking a vacation every year is important to you, you probably don't want to be an entrepreneur. When you're an entrepreneur, you're going to work harder for less money than you have ever worked in your entire life until you get that business up and running. It was 7 years in my law practice before I took my first vacation. 7 years before I even thought about it, probably 7 years before I even took a day off. So when you're building a business, first of all, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. You can't work 24/7 and not love something. You're just never gonna stick with it. But if you're a true entrepreneur and you're really getting off on what it is you're doing and how you're building it, then that time will fly by. But you're not gonna be able to do some of the things. You're not going to have as much time off as maybe you'd like, at least for a certain number of years.
So that's actually good advice for people to make sure that they're ready for the commitment that being an entrepreneur really entails.
Yeah, that's right. Plus, if you're in a leadership role in an organization, there's other people who you're hiring. There's other people you're bringing in that organization, and they are there because you have convinced them to join you in that process. And so you have a responsibility to every single one of those people to try to make that organization as successful and them as successful as you possibly can.
Oh, that's terrific. That's great words of advice. And I want to thank you for joining us today. You're going to stick around for our rapid fire, right?
Absolutely.
Terrific. It's now time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? Today's Did You Know comes from smallbizgenius.com. 90% of new American billionaires are self-made. Despite the economic hardship brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, some people have enjoyed unprecedented wealth surge, with a record high of 493 new billionaires added to Forbes' annual list of the richest people in 2021. That brings the total number of billionaires in the world to 2,755. Among the newcomers are 88 Americans, most of whom are self-made. Young entrepreneurs are likely to be encouraged by these figures, which show that certain industries and investments can thrive even in times of major economic turmoil. It's now time for our Leadership Countdown. Today's countdown comes from Forbes.com. Today we bring you the countdown to startup. Step 1, gain personal focus. Step 2, create an instant impact message. Step 3, discover what works. Step 4, protect your idea and yourself. Step 5, stop struggling to convince others. Step 6, conduct a reality check. Step 7, use focus groups to test and improve your idea. Step 8, get price quotes from manufacturers. Step 9, create your marketing strategy. Step 10, set prices for success. Step 11, organize your future with process sheets. And step 12, stay motivated with a business action plan. Follow these 12 steps to your entrepreneurial success. Please stick around. We have Dean Stoecker in the studio, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Well, we found here at Honda Center and the Anaheim Ducks that the Center for Leadership brings expertise in doing research, in doing training. The faculty that has come and given the training to our employees does all the research themselves. They're not pulling this information off the shelf. They're out there researching themselves, talking from firsthand experience, and it brings such a level of competency that we, again, don't find from other trainers that are on the market.
Well, simply put, is what really differentiates and distinguishes Fullerton and the Center for Leadership really is your expertise. You guys are able to create customized content for our business based on true research.
The faculty from Cal State Fullerton, obviously they're professors of their field. They have deep knowledge and research. but also, aside from the theory, they really bring in some practical examples, and they bring in a lot of interactive activities.
The Bringing Learning to Work initiative is our way of meeting the needs of Orange County businesses and communities. When our clients ask the Center for Leadership to come to bring learning to work, the clients know that they're getting cutting-edge information, the latest thinking in the field, but they're also getting world-class training. Welcome back to The Leadership Voice. Our next guest is Dean Stoecker. Dean is the co-founder and executive chairman of the board of Alteryx, Inc. Dean founded Alteryx in 1997 and led the company as CEO through October 2020, achieving solid organic growth and a successful IPO in March 2017. Dean's leadership and motivational skills, along with his ability to create, communicate, and realize a vision, were a driving force behind the company's 20-plus-year success. Described by some as an overnight sensation, 20 years in the making, Dean is a great strategic thinker and has truly revolutionized the analytic tools for businesses. Please welcome good friend and great person, Dean Stoecker.
Hey, Jay. Nice to see you again. Great to be back.
It's great to have you on the show. Why don't we jump right in? Our first question for today is about success. So as founder of Alteryx, I'm sure there were many ups and downs, but when did you know that Alteryx was going to succeed? Or when did you say, I think we're on to something?
Well, when you start a business, you always think this is the greatest idea ever. And the reality is no one's ever going to love your idea as much as you. So what I think I learned is that the CEO's primary role is to find the right product market fit. And until you figure out the right product market fit, you're never sure of success. We found our product market fit right around 2011 is when I started raising money because I knew that the go-to-market was going to be the biggest challenge. And so for me, I think that's the key. And I think it's a key not just for Alteryx, but it's the key for almost any tech company for sure, is to make sure you find that product market fit.
And so in 2011, it was when you realized who your true, I don't want to say customers.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. 14 years in. It took a long time to figure out what the right persona was, who the buyers would be, the kinds of analytic questions that would be asked, and the kinds of analytic tooling that would be required. And when you build a horizontal platform like ours, it becomes more and more challenging as opposed to a very specific niche product where the persona might be self-evident. In our case, we finally recognized how big and broad the citizen data science sector could be.
Oh, that's terrific. So let's talk next about core values. At Alteryx, what were some of the core values that you found made all the difference in helping to shape Alteryx's success?
That's a great question, and I think that the core values are really what makes up corporate culture. And I think one of the hardest things a CEO has to do beyond the product market fit is actually building a culture for an organization that's sustaining. And it begins with core values. It's about making sure that you put customers first. It's making sure that you're giving back to the community from which you take. And all the common things that you hear from executives around discipline and learning and training and all the things that get your team better. But all of these things make up culture. And to me, the culture is what's defining. It's the thing that keeps the organization together while you're seeing these peaks of enlightenment and troughs of disillusionment.
So even though you might be pursuing different customers or different marketing strategies or different approaches, different uses of your products and your services, ultimately it's your core values that remain true.
Oh, of course. For years, I had a saying that customer trust defines the integrity of your company. And that means it defines the integrity of your team. And so we instilled that early on, regardless of who we were selling to, what use case, what industry. As you might know, Alteryx has a myriad of use cases, from hedging fuel in the airline business to derivatives modeling on Wall Street to predicting on-field player analytics for the Green Bay Packers. And that's what makes it fun and exciting. But unless you believe in your customers, unless you are delicate with the way you address your customers, all that goes to the wayside. And so I built a culture that was based on customers first, giving back, an important part of that. You know, our company's got an Alteryx for Good program. We've given $300 million worth of software to universities to get students back to cognitive learning. And culture's the only thing that will keep an organization alive.
No, that's terrific. Can we talk a little bit about leadership development? How has your leadership evolved during your career?
Well, it's a challenge, I think, for any first-time entrepreneur, a founder, you know, who has some great idea and then really trying to figure out, what do I know and what do I not know, and how do you surround yourself with the talent that plays off of your weaknesses and fills in the gaps that you don't have. I think the misnomer for a lot of entrepreneurs, you see this up in Silicon Valley quite a bit, where I think they judge leadership based upon how many followers you have. Leadership is actually around how many leaders you create. And so I've spent a lot of time helping my leadership team get better. And I've seen as people have moved on from Alteryx over the last 2 or 3 years, it's awesome to see them going from a director job to a vice president job at another company, or from a vice president job to a chief executive somewhere else. And that's, to me, leadership. And you know you've got the right team when when they got your back, they're covering off on things you don't know, regardless of what LinkedIn people always, recommend you for skills that you have. Most of those things that people have recommended for me on my LinkedIn page, I don't even possess those skills. And so you have to have people around you who can fill in those gaps.
I think it's been said that early in our careers, we focus on developing ourselves, and ultimately success will be the extent to which we're able to develop others.
Yep.
Now, has that always been a belief that you had, or is it something that evolved and developed over time for you?
My worries early on and all the way through my retirement were around, do we have enough leadership talent? And so early on, I used to get into arguments with my then CFO. I'd say, Gary, I need a big budget. We're going to put together a big budget for leadership training. We're going to teach these people. We're going to put them through, the 7 habits of highly effective people, and we're going to give them skills that they don't have today. And he said, well, why would we do that, Dean? And I said, why not? He said, well, what if we spend all this money and they all leave? And I said, well, what if we don't spend this money and they all stay?
Exactly. Exactly. I think it was Richard Branson that said, treat people and develop people so that they could leave, but treat them so well that they don't particularly want to.
Well, I think people have to actually understand that people are your biggest asset. They are not a part of your cost structure. They are not just an investment. They are your biggest asset. And if you don't treat people right, they will leave. And part of that treating them right is helping them in their own journeys, because you're right, at the end of your career, it's not about how many leaders or how many followers you create. It's about how many leaders you create.
Well, I think the leadership approach that you're taking and that you've evolved toward is very consistent with, I think, some of the latest thinking in leadership. So I think it's great to hear that you have that view. It's kind of if you use metaphors of the old school, was that leaders are golfers. Where they choose a club like they're choosing employees, and they swing it.
Well, I think the aside from that is that when you first start a business, you have to know as much as possible about everything possible. And as you evolve throughout your career, the goal is to know less and less about more and more. And that means you've accomplished the difficult task of empowering other people to do the things that either you don't like to do, you don't want to do, or that you're just not good at.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so anyway, it's great to see that you are the gardener now that is helping to cultivate and helping to develop and nourish and raise up the leaders around you and helping them to become closer and closer to their potential.
In fact, the most gratifying thing in retirement right now has been spending time with founders and CEOs of startup companies who I know are going through the same journey that I went through. And it's so much fun to kind of guide them into things that are going to happen that they don't know are going to happen, to alert them to the challenges that they're going to face. To me, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And today's show, and the topic of today's show is really for those people. It's for those folks that are starting out, that are thinking of doing this, that want to get on the right path. So, chance for some final advice for an entrepreneur that wants to start a company or build a company. What advice would you give them?
Well, the first advice I would give you is don't wait till you're 40 to start a business. I started when I was 40 years old. I took the company public when I was 60 years old. And so kind of an unusual path for sure, unconventional journey. But aside from that, I would tell you, never give up. You know, you will see these peaks of enlightenment, these troughs of disillusionment, and if you can't get through the trough of disillusionment, because the CEO founder is the loneliest job on the planet, you got to rely on your family, your friends, your humor, your higher power, because if you can get through the trough, you're going to have a spectacular outcome.
Absolutely, that's perfect advice. So thank you, Dean, for joining us and for this discussion. You'll stick around for the rapid fire?
Oh, absolutely.
Terrific. It's now time for our leadership example, courtesy of Statista.com. Today we bring you the 15 most valuable companies in the world based on market capitalization in 2021. It's now time for our leadership lesson. Every episode, we bring our viewers a 3-minute lesson delivered by a subject matter expert. Today we have Professor Lorenzo Bizzi with today's leadership lesson.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Lorenzo Bizzi, and this is your leadership lesson, which is about the top 3 mistakes that leaders make when trying to expand their business through diversification. Imagine this situation. Say your business is going great, cash is pouring in, customers are satisfied, employees are loyal, everything looks great, except you're still not happy. Why? Because you've reached a plateau and you don't know how to scale up your business. Then a clear solution appears: diversification. Expand your company by entering a new business. You have to be careful because there are 3 typical mistakes to avoid. First, you want to enter a new business because it's easy to enter. That's a mistake. All other things being equal, the easier it is to enter a business, the lower the profit potential of that business. If it is easy to enter a business, competition will pour, margins will be low, customers will have a hard time understanding who's better, and establishing competitive advantage will be expensive. When should you enter? When entering is easy for you and difficult for other companies. If you can use some of the assets and resources you already have to enter the business, then it makes sense to enter. If you have to acquire all new assets, then it might be a bad idea. Second, you want to enter a business because you want to grow. That's a mistake. How so? Well, say your business is mature and another business is growing. You want to use the cash from the mature business to enter the growing business. But why not giving the cash back to investors? And if they want, they invest in an already existing company in the growing business. Never enter a business just because you want to grow. If you cannot establish competitive advantage in the new business, you will dilute your advantage and overall make less money. Third, you want to enter a new business to spread risks. If you have two businesses, in case one business goes bad, then the other can make up for it. Theoretically, that makes sense. Most times, though, there are many more effective ways to spread your risks than entering a business you don't know. You can spread your financial risk by diversifying your investments, not necessarily by entering a brand new business. So, when does it make sense to diversify? Well, only when you can exploit synergies with your current business that allow you to create a condition of competitive advantage. Remember, a lot of times diversification destroys rather than creates values. It is alluring, yet dangerous. Only do it when you know you can establish and sustain competitive advantage in your business. I am Lorenzo Bizzi, and this has been your Leadership Lesson.
Thank you, Dr. Bizzi, for that terrific leadership lesson. It's now time for a new segment on the Leadership Voice, Rapid Fire. We've asked our guests the exact same questions in a rapid fire format. So, here we go. Question 1, failure. Discuss a time when you failed and how this failure made you better in the long term.
Well, first of all, I believe it is absolutely true that we learn the most of our lessons from failure. You know, when I'm doing well and I'm winning, I start to feel like I'm bulletproof. And that's when I'll take one to the heart. So the truth is, failure is necessary in order to learn the lessons. My biggest failure was actually PCG, Physicians Capital Group, in 2008. 2008 financial crisis came along, killed the company. It was heartbreaking for me. It's probably the best business idea I've ever had, and it was the worst failure. But I learned a lot of lessons.
Whew. In 24 years, there's been many failures, but the one that strikes me the strongest is having visited two customers who we had failed. They didn't understand our software. They didn't understand the utility. They didn't understand pretty much anything. And I took that as a personal responsibility. In fact, that's when we started our customer-centric behavior that led to a much better culture. I went to an event, a Gartner event, and the speaker was Don Pepper, probably the world's leader in one-to-one marketing. And he said, entrepreneurs, I'm going to tell you something that's very important. Customer trust defines the integrity of your company. And I had just come off of these two meetings where they didn't trust us. And that changed almost everything for me and the company.
Luck. Can you talk about the role that luck played in your successes and failures during your career?
Well, my success as a lawyer is what made all the rest of it possible. And my success as a lawyer was because I got a great murder case come into my office that was a high publicity case. I got a ton of publicity, had a great result, and it was in the first year that I was practicing law. It made all the difference in the world. That set me on a course of tremendous success in the practice of law, and that led to everything else. Now, I think I was a pretty good lawyer, but the truth of the matter is that was pure luck that client happened to come into my office as a new lawyer and hire me to represent him.
They always say it's better to be lucky than good. I'm not sure that that's necessarily true, but there is clearly some degree of luck and timing in building anything great. And I was the recipient of being lucky enough to time the market the right way, lucky enough to have found great co-founders to help me along the way, lucky enough to have attracted amazing venture capitalists along the way, and lucky enough to have taken the company public. So yeah, luck plays a role.
Talent. Can you talk about the role that talent and expertise around you played into your success as an entrepreneur?
Smartest thing I ever did was to hire people smarter than me. I have to say that most of my success is because of the people that I've hired and the people that have worked not for me, but with me. I consider the people that are in my companies to be part of a team. And I got to tell you, they're brilliant, they're great, and I would not be near as successful as if it wasn't for those people putting their heart and soul into the enterprises that I worked with them on.
It's everything about success. Our talent, our very first company meeting in 1998, this is 1 year after we started. I think there were 9 of us. I had read a book by 2 Swedish psychologists, I think they were. And the book is called Funky Business. And the tagline of it, the subtitle was, it's talent that makes capital dance, not capital that makes talent dance. And I think that's very important for people to recognize, is that you have to be good stewards of your own money. You have to be better stewards of VC's money. And you have to invest in the talent that elevates the returns on those investments. And so it's all about people. Biggest asset you can have.
It's now time for the final word. Each of you will have just a moment to share your final pearls of wisdom.
Best piece of advice I ever got was I was in my 30s and I was on a panel that we were appearing in front of a bunch of high school seniors, must have been 2,000 of them, it was some kind of a conference. And Roger Smith, who was then chairman of General Motors, was on the panel with me. And he said something I've never forgotten. I think it's the best advice you could ever give a young person. He said, in your teens, have as much fun as you can. In your 20s, learn as much as you can. In your 30s, work as hard as you can. In your 40s, make as much money as you can. In your 50s, get as much power as you can. In your 60s, get out as gracefully as you can. And from 70 on, have as much fun as you can.
I would say if there was one final send-off, it'd be never give up. If you started a business, you had a passion, you were going to solve a problem, you identified an addressable market. It's going to take you a while to get there. Not everyone's a WhatsApp that sells for $16 billion on no revenue. And so you got to be patient. You got to stick to your knitting and figure out how to get through the swamps of despair. And if you can do that, you're going to be successful. There's just no doubt in my mind.
And there you have our final word. Thank you, Dean Stoecker and Terry Giles, for joining us on today's show. If you have a question or need advice, send us your questions here to the Leadership Voice by email, leadershipvoice@fullerton.edu, or by Twitter @CSUF_leadership. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today's show. Today we discussed wisdom from company builders and brought you 2 accomplished and inspirational leaders. Thank you to Terry Giles and Dean Stoecker for joining us, and also special thanks to Professor Lorenzo Bizzi for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of The Leadership Voice as we feature fresh and relevant topics to guide your leadership development. I'm Jay Barbuto, and on behalf of the Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton, we'll see you next time right here on The Leadership Voice.